If you didn't have a chance to grab a worship guide on the way in this morning, our ushers are here to serve you. Your sermon note sheet is in there if you're a Christian and you're going to take notes today. That's in there. I'm kind of kidding. Your giving envelope if you're giving on site, or if most of you give online and via text. And then finally, your next step card. If you're a guest with us today, please take a worship guide. Fill out that next step card. You can either fill out and turn it at the Connection Center or drop it into the bucket later on in the service. Thank you guys for serving so well. Of course, Chris just mentioned it. We have outreach groups. Part of those outreach groups, we have ministry happening at the Riverbend Prison every Saturday, and we just get to welcome the guys that join us from Riverbend. Thank you guys for going along the ride for us. Church family, would you just tell them that we love them and we're thankful that they're with us? Thank you so much that you allow us into your life and that you're along for the journey today. We had an incredible turnout last week for those interested in freedom groups, standing room only in the classroom that they were going through the orientation. Their training was happening on some of the new group leaders. So lots was happening after service. Today is step 2 in our next steps process, which is what we call Discover. If you haven't gone through that, please do. That's where you take a personality assessment and a spiritual giftings test so that you can walk out of there understanding what God's wired you to do. Lots happening in the life of the church. We're in week 2 of a series that we're calling Breathing Room. We're also in day 7 of our 21 days of prayer and fasting, everyone, which is an exciting time for us as a church. We're in day 7. Maybe you feel like it's month 7 right now in the process. We have lots of people that are doing what we call a Daniel fast, and we have resources that we're giving you to explain all of those things. Anyone still struggling with the no caffeine, no sugar headache? Are you glad you're over with that right now? That you've been delivered from that? That's because you're an addict, and God's helping you get free of that. Most people go, yeah, I already knew that. Others of us are fasting from social media and technology. I know in our home, we're taking time to intentionally just slow down the schedule, intentionally connect with one another relationally. Our kids are totally disconnected from technology, no computers, no video games, no phones, no TV. It's been amazing. And so the only TV that we're watching is if we watch a family movie together. It's been incredible. They've been excited about family movie night all of a sudden. We've watched 5 animated films this week alone. And it's just been a good time for us as a family. We slow our schedule down as well during this time. Ashley and I say yes to fewer things. We talked about it last week, just the reprioritization, the reassessing of what's necessary in our lives. We talked about living not in accordance to the behaviors and patterns of this world, not copying and conforming to that, but we live differently so that we can have some breathing room, some space. We talked about how prayer connects us to God, fasting disconnects us from the world, and many of us are going on that journey for the first time. I was talking with someone this past week. They just recently committed their life to Christ here at Connect, got baptized, and now fasting for the first time in their life, just going on the journey. I am so proud to be a part of a body that encourages that in the lives of people. Is this awesome? How many are, you got your prayer guides and your soap guides? I don't know where I set mine down at. Those are an encouragement to you. All of the readings this month in your soap guide, we've been reading in Ezra and Nehemiah. We're getting ready to go into Esther. All of these characters of the Bible, that fasting was just a part of the regular rhythm of their life. I had several of you buy and get a hold of the fasting books that we offered to you. We recommend those to you. We restocked them back up. Those all went out last week. And by the way, we give those to you at our cost, but if you can't afford it, take it. I believe so strongly in the impact it'll make on your life. Either one of these books that have 21-day journals that go with them, they'll impact your life. You'll get to the end of the 21 days and be a different person. If you can't afford it, take it with you. It'll be a blessing to your life. We underwrite that. That's our joy to be able to do that. It's in these times where we intentionally disconnect that we see differently, we hear differently, the world looks different. As we turn it off, as we cut it out, we're able to fill up on different things. It says the margins become greater in our lives. We talked about this last week. The things that we actually say are the most important things in our life don't then get diminished, but they don't get squeezed out. The noise doesn't squeeze out the voice of God. You hear it more clearly. But here's the deal. The best things in life happen in the margins. And yet most of us live marginless lives. We copy and conform to the patterns of this world. But here's the deal. Margin only comes to those who fight for it. It will not be given to you. Someone is not going to hand you margin. You are going to have to fight for it. And someone will always have something for you to do that you can say yes to. I don't know if any of you have ever driven a car that's out of alignment. It pulls, it drags. You have to constantly fight against. And that's the pull of this world. We are born out of alignment. So the culture pulls you from being in alignment with God, and you're going to have to fight to stay in alignment with Him. We talked about it briefly last week. Sabbath, this whole idea of rest, healthy pace, healthy rhythm. I had a couple of people ask me last week, just how do you pursue that and how do you do that? So I want to address that this week, because the truth is we honor God by resting. Rest is actually a spiritual act. Sabbath should be taken just as seriously as work is taken. So we work hard and we Sabbath hard. We honor God by keeping the Sabbath holy. So this week I want to talk to us about maintaining and developing an attitude of rest. Because some of you actually need to give yourself permission to rest and not feel guilty about it. Before we jump into that, though, I'd just like to give you a few resources that have been a blessing to my life personally. I think they will be to you as well. These books have helped shape some of my thinking on this to get to a healthy rhythm and pace. We referenced a couple of these last week. Sabbath is Resistant, Walter Brueggemann's book. Of course, Addicted to Busy by Pastor Brady out of New Life in Colorado. This book right here is really what started the process for me of just changing my whole perspective on Sabbath. Mark Buchanan's book, The Rest of God, is a phenomenal book on rest and Sabbath. He writes, here's a quote from the book. I'll just kind of give you a little teaser. He says this: without rest, we miss the rest of God. The rest He invites us to enter more fully so that we might know Him more deeply. Sabbath is both, and here's what we're going to talk about. It's not just about a day, it is an attitude. To nurture such stillness, it is both time on the calendar. Yes, it is a day, but it is a disposition of your heart. So Sabbath can actually be an attitude of rest happening even when it's not your Sabbath day. It is a day we enter, but just as much as the way we see. And he goes on to say this, that Sabbath imparts the rest of God, actual physical, mental, spiritual rest, but also the rest of God, the things of God's nature and presence that we miss in our busyness. The rest of God. Mark Buchanan, you need to check it out. Let's talk about it. How do we pursue an attitude of rest? Well, let's always look through the filter of Scripture, and let's start in Genesis chapter 2. This is a biblical principle. Verse 1 of chapter 2 of Genesis, so the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. So God is done completing the world. On the seventh day, God has finished His work of creation. So everyone say this word out loud, He rested from all of His work, and God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy. So it's set apart because it was the day when He rested from all of His work of creation. I just want to ask one question. Why would God, omnipotent, all-powerful God, need to rest? Is it possible that one of the reasons He rests is because, like a concerned parent, He lies down next to an exhausted child who needs a nap? Is it possible that God knows that we need to rest, and therefore out of His love for us, He literally lies down one day a week beside us? And I wonder how many of us are missing the opportunity to rest with God in our busyness. Psalm 95, very familiar psalm for a lot of us on the theme of worship, but it says this in verse 7, for He is our God, we are the people of His pasture and the sheep of His hand. Now before I read the rest of the passage, I just want you to realize how important the next few words are that we're getting ready to read. We're going to see it again in another scripture that we're going to read, but the next few words we're going to read in the rest of this psalm is very important for you understanding what Sabbath is all about. It goes on to say, today, if, that's a very key word, if you will hear His voice, Do not harden your hearts as is in the rebellion during the wilderness years when the children of the Israelites were wandering. And when your fathers tested me, they tried me, though they saw my work. And verse 10 says, for 40 years I was grieved with that generation and said, it is a people, now look at this, who go astray in their hearts. God connected people going astray in their hearts with people that didn't recognize the Sabbath. And they do not know my ways. So I swore in my wrath, they will not enter my rest. People that aren't entering into the rest of God, their hearts are going astray, and they're allowing the pool of culture. They're copying the behaviors and patterns of this world rather than being in alignment with God. Their hearts go astray, and they can't live in the rest of God. Genesis 2 tells us that God rested on the seventh day from all of his work. Psalm 95 tells us that God swore his wrath that they wouldn't enter in his rest. Okay, Genesis 2, Psalm 95. Now let's go to the New Testament, Hebrews 4, because it actually connects these two scriptures. It says this in verse 4 of chapter 4, for he has spoken in a certain place, referencing Genesis 2, of the seventh day in this way, and God rested on the seventh day from all of his works. They're referencing the passage we just read in Genesis 2. And then again, he's spoken in this place, referencing what we read in Psalm 95. They shall not enter my rest, since therefore it remains that some must enter it, and those to whom it was first preached did not enter it because of, so you don't enter rest because your hearts have gone astray, you're disobedient. And again, he designates a certain day, saying in David, today, after such a long time as has been said, today if you will hear his voice, not harden your hearts, for if Joshua had given them rest, this is when they were coming into the promised land, then he would not afterward have spoken of another day. And here's what you need to catch. There remains, this is New Testament, there remains therefore a rest for the people of God. This is an amazing statement in the New Testament concerning Sabbath. In case you missed it, here's what it's saying. There's still a Sabbath, there's still a rest, and there's still a rest that we should be entering into. It's really what he's saying. And again, I'm talking about an attitude, even beyond the day. Because if you start to take on the attitude of rest, your actions will then follow suit. But it's not just about the day, it's about God establishing an attitude of rest in your heart. It's a disposition of your heart. So more than taking just a day a week. And let me just say, don't be legalistic about this. You may own a business where you have to be open on Sunday. But you can give your employees a different day off of the week, and you need to be taking off a day of the week. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but I have to work on Sundays. And it's not just Sunday morning. Sunday is a full work day for Ashley and me. We quite often have meetings and counseling sessions and gatherings at our house. We have a gathering at our house tonight. So how do I honor the Sabbath? You say, Devin, you dishonor the Sabbath every week. You're working on the Sabbath. And then you say, well, actually you're good because the Sabbath is technically Saturday, so you're still good. Guess what? I work on Saturday too. Saturday is a full day of work, preparation, so that I can work again on Sunday. Saturday's a full work day. But I still honor the principle by resting and taking a day a week. It's more than just the day. Don't get legalistic about that. I don't just want to talk to you about a day. I want to talk to you about an attitude which should be present. Listen, that attitude should be present not just on your day off. So some of us have an attitude of rest only on that day, and then the other 6 days are filled with worry and stress and anxiety. You're overworked and overcommitted. And if we're going to have an attitude of rest, here's what we need to do. You need to remember that it's your God that's on the throne, and he has everything in order and in control, and he is sovereign. You've got to buy into that promise and truth if you're going to pursue an attitude of rest. The other thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to fight some other attitudes and change some other thoughts and attitudes that you have about some other areas of your life in order to pursue an attitude of rest. And here's the first attitude you're going to have to change. You need to change your attitude toward work. Your attitude toward work. I don't know if you realize how much time we work. According to the Bible, though, you're supposed to work 6 days and then a day off. But we spend most of our time thinking about work, planning for work, planning around work, feeling guilty if we don't do enough of it, and feeling resentful towards it when we do too much of it. Work. Our life revolves around it. But you will never have a proper understanding of rest until you understand work. So let me say it this way. You will never understand the gift of rest until you appreciate the gift of work. Some of us need to change our attitude toward work. Work, hear me, is actually a gift from God. Work is not because of the curse. Work actually was before the curse. I've heard people say, well, man, if Adam and Eve had messed this whole thing up, we wouldn't be doing this work thing. Not true. Work existed before the fall. I don't know about that, Devin. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. The Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. That is before the fall. God gives us the gift of work. In other words, God gave Adam a job. Now, how's that for a boss? The same reason that he created rest, he creates work. Here's the reason. He loves us. He wanted us to do something that would be rewarding and fulfilling. God didn't want us just sitting around, bored to death, not having anything to do that brings fulfillment to our lives that we could accomplish. He gave each of us a gift so that we could do something with our minds and with our hands. And after we do it, we can be fulfilled and find significance in it because we accomplished something. God gave us work because he loves us. And some of us need to retrain our thinking and our approach to work. Now, I will say this. The curse makes work harder. Ever had a bad day at work? Ever had a tough day? Even the staff members here at Connect have bad days at work. Sometimes I'm the reason they have a bad day at work. Let me help you. The next time you have a difficult day at work, I just want to help you. I want to tell you something that will help you be grateful for your job. On the way home from work, I want you to stop by the pharmacy and buy a rectal thermometer from Johnson & Johnson. Okay, the illustration will not get any more gross than that. Relax. And when you get home, I want you to open the box and take out the written material that comes with the thermometer, and I want you to read through it. And you will see in small print a statement that says this: every rectal thermometer made by Johnson & Johnson is personally tested. And then I want you to get down on your knees and thank God that you don't work in the quality control department at Johnson & Johnson. Here's the reality. Okay, everyone focus. It's all right. A lot of us are frustrated chasing the dream while we're actually living in it. We're frustrated, chasing after something, and you're actually living in it. Every one of us is gifted by God and called to do something. Do you know what the word vocation actually means? The word vocation is rooted in the Latin word for voice. It means the work that the voice has told you to do. Parker Palmer, in his book, Let Your Life Speak, he says this about vocation, because it's rooted in the Latin word for voice. Vocation does not mean a goal that I pursue. It means a calling that I hear. Before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I must listen to my life telling me who I am. See, that's the problem. Your vocation has been based upon someone else telling you who you are, and now you've lived your life based upon the other voices in your life instead of the voice. I must listen for the truths and values at the heart of my own identity, not the standards by which I must live, but the standards by which I cannot help but live if I am living my own life. That's vocation. And yet somehow we don't think that a fireman can be called to be a fireman. fact, let me give you this illustration. What comes to your mind when you hear the phrase, the work of the Lord? He's involved in the work of the Lord. Okay, now, what immediately comes to your mind? You think pastor, you think missionary, you think someone in vocational ministry, right? No, listen to me. Whatever you do, if you are a follower of Christ, you are in the work of the Lord, friends. And until you see it like that, can you imagine if the whole world was made up of preachers? That'd be miserable. Horrible place to live. Yelling at each other, correcting one another, trying to show someone else what you saw in Scripture, finishing each other's sentences, which you guys often do for me. I mean, if we had no firefighters, no policemen, no nurses, no doctors, no teachers, no construction workers, listen, you're dependent on preachers, ain't nothing getting built. We need some construction workers. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23. Whatever you do, whatever your task may be, work from the soul. That is, put in your very best effort as something not done for man, but done for the Lord and not for man, knowing with all certainty that it is from the Lord. So what you're doing is for him, and it is from him, not from men, that you will receive the inheritance. The inheritance isn't the promotion. You receive an inheritance from him, which is your greatest reward, and it is the Lord Christ, whom you actually serve. Hey, listen, everybody, the Lord is your boss. You and Adam have something in common. You see that? That's the problem. We think we're working for men. Well, no wonder you're tired and worn out. We keep looking for approval and affirmation from the wrong place. Instead of recognizing that our reward comes from him. We spend too much time and energy in our jobs trying to win affirmation, attention, and approval from man. Listen, God has called you. The voice has told you something, and if you will give yourself wholeheartedly to that, you will learn to rest. Can I just tell you, the best rest you will ever have is after a hard day at work doing what God has called you and designed you to do. You know when I sleep best? Monday. Sunday, we give our best. We're living in the sweet spot, what he's designed us to do. And on Monday, Ashley and I, we crash. Best rest of the week. I drop the kids off at school. I come back and I lay down and I'm in a coma for like 3 hours. And I don't feel guilty. Because you have to maintain an attitude of rest in order to be able to put your hand to what he's called you to and do your best. And then he says this in verse 25 of the same chapter. He says, the sullen servant who does shoddy work will be held responsible. Being a follower of Christ doesn't cover up bad work. Can I just tell you, we should be the best employees they've ever seen. We should be the ones setting the example. You should be the ones getting the raise because you're doing the best work. Some of us need to change our attitude toward work. Here's the second thing we need to change our attitude towards. We need to change our attitude toward time. Toward time. We have convinced ourselves that we can actually make time. Let me just tell you a few things about time. Here's the first one. You cannot make time. It's already been made. God created the earth and the sun, put the earth in its orbit. Time has already been made. You cannot change it. You can't do one thing about it. You can't add a second to it. Maybe someone has said to you, can't you make time for me? Okay, now think about that. Can't you make time for me? Now, I am somewhat of a grammarian. I spend a lot of time making sure that I write things and say things grammatically correct, in correct tense. Which is hilarious because Mom and Dad will tell you, when I was in school, I hated to read and write. And now I spend the majority of my life reading and writing. So sometimes I think differently when I hear someone say something. I think, was that the best way to say it? I think in sentence structure and noun-verb association. Can't you make time for me? Okay, for me. Let me just go to grammar English class for me just a second. Don't turn your brains off. Stay with me. Can't you make time for me? For me is a prepositional phrase, meaning that when you remove the prepositional phrase, the sentence structure still stays intact. So the meaning of the sentence doesn't change when you remove the prepositional phrase. Are you still with me, everybody? Okay. So can you take time for me? You remove the prepositional phrase. Here's what they're really asking. Can't you make time? Well, I can't make time for you or anyone else for that matter. Only God can make time. God already made time. I can't make an extra hour. How many would like for God to give you 1 extra hour every day? 1 extra hour every day. You know what you would say when you got to the end of that hour? Can I have another one? We can't make time. Here's the other thing you need to know about time. Not only can you not make time, you cannot save time. You see, time is like money. You have a certain amount of it, and you have to manage it. You have so much money for your house, so much money for your utilities, so much money for your car, so much money for food, clothing. You have all these things that your money is going towards. And if 1 month your electric bill is higher than it normally is, then you have to take from something else because you have an expense that's higher. Even if that's from what you would normally put in savings, you have to take from that because you have an abnormally high bill. Or you have to make more money. Okay, here's the problem with time. You can't make more of it. You only have a certain amount. You can't make more of it. You can't save it. So when someone asks me to go to lunch, I then either have to take time away from the staff, or take time away from studying, or take time away from my family, or take time away from building plans. I can't add extra time to my life, so I've got to say no to something in order to say yes to something else. I can't save it up. I can't use it later because time is going out of your account every second. It goes out 1 second at a time. No matter what you do, you cannot save time. You cannot store it up. And yet we spend our lives trying to save time. Every time I go to the airport, I'm getting ready to go through security, and I'm looking at the lines. I don't know if anyone else does this, and I'm trying to find, what am I trying to find? I'm trying to find the quickest line. And I never do. Inevitably, I get in the line, and here comes 3 little carriages, and they got triplets, and they're unloading stuff, and now I'm stuck, and I'm watching the line that I should have got in. When I'm on I-40, traffic is slowing down. Have you ever noticed this? The lane that you're not in is always moving. So what do? I put my blinker on, swerve over, get in that lane. And it slows down. And then what do? Now this lane is moving. All because I wanted to save time. And in an effort to save time, now I'm losing time. Every time I try to save it, I end up wasting it. I pick my kids up from school. And I think that I can actually listen to what my son wants to say and still think about all the things that I'm trying to accomplish in my day. And here's what I'm doing. I'm wasting time. Because he's never going to be in 2nd grade again. He's never going to be 8 years old and 6 months and 4 days old. Tomorrow, he's going to be 8 years old, 6 months, and 5 days old. And I'm wasting time thinking that I'm saving it. You cannot save it. You cannot make it. Here's the thing that you need to know about time. Time, you can only spend it. And you will spend it. In fact, you're spending it right now. Let's suppose that someone were to call you tomorrow and to tell you that there was a donor that loves you very much that wanted to donate to you and deposit into your account every day 86,400 pennies. The only stipulation is that you must, in 24 hours, spend the 86,400 pennies. Well, you sit down, you start to think, you go, why are we talking in pennies? That's $864. Every day, someone's going to deposit $864 into my account. The only stipulation, there is no cross-collateralization. For you non-accounting people, that means the balance does not carry over. It starts over from zero the next day. You have to spend it. You will spend it every time they make the deposit. You've got 86,400 pennies, $864, which turns into $6,000 a week, which turns into $315,000. How many would like for someone to deposit 86,400 pennies in your account today? How many would have a hard time spending it in 24 hours? Yeah, I have a daughter that could spend it like that. I mean, I tell you what. It's kind of fun to think that way, but let's talk reality. Here's reality. There is someone that loves you very much, that gives you 86,400 seconds every day, and you cannot go back and pick it up. You will spend it. You may waste it, but you will spend it. You cannot recapture it. And those 86,400 seconds turn into 1,440 hours, which turns into 24 hours. It is a day. It's time. You can't make it. You can't save it. You will only spend it. So when it comes to our schedules, the question is not, well, is this right? Is this wrong? Are we available? Is it free? Here's the better question. Is it wise? Is it wise? My wife helps me to determine what is wise to say yes to. Because you know who wants to say yes to everything? This guy. And with wisdom, she goes, sure, we can do it. Sure, it's open. Sure, it's available. Is it the wisest thing to do, Devin? Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. Look what it says. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity that you have in these evil days. Be very careful, because there is a natural pull. Culture pulls you away from being aligned. And the busyness and the stress and the tension, you're going to have to fight against. Listen, margin will not be given to you. You're going to have to fight for it. No one's going to hand it to you. You got to think through how you plan, what do you say yes to, what do you say no to. Be very careful how you live, not as unwise, but wise. Otherwise, you will end up living a margin-less life. In light of the fact that our days are numbered, James chapter 4 tells us that our life is like a vapor, it's like a mist. It's here and then it's gone. In light of that, in light that every day is a gift from God, in light of that we have the opportunity every day to spend our life for Him or for meaningless things. Wise but not unwise, making the most of the opportunities that He gives you. You can only spend time. The question is, how are you going to spend it, wisely or foolishly? William James says this: the greatest use of life is to spend it for something that actually will outlast your life. Is that what you would say you've been spending your life on? Is that what you say you've been committing the moments of your life to? Something that actually outlives it? A few months ago, we were in worship on Sunday morning. Elise and the worship team were leading us. Worship was going on around me. Everyone was worshiping. Everyone around me was engaged and focused on God. And you know what I was doing? Confession time. I was thinking about a problem that I needed to fix. Okay, it was a problem that I didn't want to have to address, but it was a problem that I needed to have to address and I needed to fix. Anyone ever have one of those kind of problems? I needed to fix this and I didn't want to have to fix it, but I knew it was the right thing to fix it. And the Spirit of God just spoke to me and just said, hey, what are you doing? That's kind of how God talks to me. And I said, well, I'm trying to work out this problem. And He said, well, everyone else is worshiping me. You might want to join them. So after that rebuke, I started to worship Him. And while I was worshiping Him, I felt as if He said this to me: for the next hour. The sole purpose that you are on this earth is to minister to these people. They deserve your full attention. They need everything you have. I will take care of the problem, Devin. I need you to choose to spend this hour on earth honoring me by being fully present and fully engaged with the calling that I've placed upon your life. You see, we choose how we spend our time. I just don't have enough of it. No, you're choosing to spend it in the wrong places. You've chosen how you've spent the first half of this service. How will you choose to spend the next remaining moments that we have together? We've got about 20 minutes that you choose how you're going to spend them. How engaged will you be? Now here's the sad thing. We believe that rest is a poor investment of our time. We believe that spending some of our time resting is a poor investment. And it's not. It's actually biblical. It's just like tithing. Many people don't believe that the 90% with God's blessing will go further than the 100% without it. Okay, listen to me. Many of you don't believe that more can be accomplished in 6 days with God's blessing on it than 7 days without it. You are actually convinced you can get more done by yourself in 7 days than 6 days with God. Now, you don't say that, but that's how you live your life. You have to make the choice, and you actually honor God by choosing to rest. You actually communicate to Him that you trust Him by believing that He can accomplish more in you and through you in 6 days together than 7 days not together. So what are you going to do with your time? The two times in the Old Testament, Exodus 20, Deuteronomy chapter 5, where the Sabbath commandment is given, there is a different reason given why we should observe it. In Exodus chapter 20, he tells us that we should observe it to celebrate God's creation. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, it says that you need to remember it because you were slaves in Egypt and God redeemed you and set you free. So, Exodus, celebrating God's creation, you're His creation, celebrating who you are in Him, and celebrating the fact that you were once a slave and He redeemed you. That's why we honor it. You need to understand something. Maybe you don't fully understand what it means to be a slave. Because slaves can't rest. They can only stop when the slave master tells them to stop. They cannot choose to take a day off. There is a person with a whip telling them that they cannot stop and rest. That's what slavery is. God, in His mercy, listen to me, drowned the taskmasters in the sea. Here's the bad thing, though. Most of us pull them back out of the water and resuscitate them. We give the authority back to the taskmasters that God has already delivered us from. And we live a self-induced life of slavery. Everyone just take a big breath. It's all right. You ever gotten whipped when you were trying to take a rest? I mean, here's what it sounds like a little bit. Who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? Have you forgotten all the things that still need to get done and are still not done? Apparently you've forgotten, so let me give you the list again. Or how about this one? Maybe you get whipped this way. If people saw you resting, they would be appalled. You should be embarrassed. If your clients knew that you were resting and that you had a stop time when it came to work, they would fire you. Now listen to me. That's the taskmaster. That's slavery. You ever had that happen? You just lie down for a few moments, but you can't rest because your mind tells you about all the things that you should be doing. That's the taskmaster. And here's what the Bible says. Jesus comes along and says, I came to set you free. I came to be your God so that I could be in control and you could stop and you could rest and take a day off. Change our attitude about work, change our attitude about time, and finally, we need to change our attitude toward God. Now listen very carefully, because this is a bold statement that I'm getting ready to make. If you have difficulty resting, you have difficulty trusting God. If you have difficulty resting, you most likely have difficulty trusting God. Well, I guess God, he's probably not up for the task. Probably he's not up to taking care of things while I'm not working. I mean, if I take a day off, it's going to upset all of creation. We don't need that to happen. I mean, either God's in control or he's not. Either God is working things on your behalf or he's not. We read in Hebrews 4, the reason they couldn't enter his rest is because of unbelief. Let me give you another word for unbelief. Mistrust. Rest requires trust. There's a boating company by the name of Correct Craft. It has been in existence for over 90 years. It's a Christian-owned company. And in the life of the company, they've always taken a day off. They've always taken Sunday off in the life of the company. During World War II, they were making boats for the war effort. The government came to them and some other boat manufacturers, and they said, we need 700 boats in 15 days to cross the Rhine River. So they went to these different boat manufacturers to find out how many boats each manufacturer could commit to making. Well, at the time, Correct Craft was making 60 boats in a month. So they were making 30 boats in 15 days. And they said to the government, we need to pray about it, and we'll ask the Lord what he would have us do. Now, don't you always love it when the government's waiting on the Lord to speak now? And they're dependent upon it. And so they prayed, and during their time of prayer, because prayer connects you to God, and you hear some things that you otherwise wouldn't, God said to them, I'm going to help you make 10 times as many boats as you normally would. You're going to make 300 boats in 15 days. And then immediately God gave them an idea. They put an ad in the paper for you young adults. That's it's like a hard copy of a podcast kind of idea. It's like paper. They would bring it to your house because you could subscribe to it, and you would read words, string them together, make sentences. And in the ad, they asked for some volunteers to come to the manufacturing plant. And all of these women came to help. More than likely, they were Marthas. If you were here last week, you'd understand that. A lot of them were the wives of the servicemen. Several of their children came. So many children came, and so many wives and women came. 4 city blocks taken up by the amount of volunteers that showed up to help them manufacture their boats. And then the son of the owner got an idea. He got a dream from God while he was sleeping that night about a machine that would make boats go faster. And it's a part that is still used by every major boat manufacturer in the country today. Well, a few days after they got started, Sunday came along, and they closed. And they told everyone to go home, just like they normally did. And the colonel in charge of the effort found out. And he said, you can't do that. We're in a state of emergency. We need 700 boats in 15 days. You can't close. And they said, we're not open on Sunday. The Bible says we're supposed to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. We're supposed to rest 1 day a week. We'll get more done in 6 than you could ever get done in 7. They said it in a loving way, though. Not like me. And the colonel said, if you don't open your doors, I'm going to close your company forever, file treason charges against you, and throw you in prison. Now, how many know right then they had a choice on who they were going to trust? And they said, we're going to trust God. The colonel started treason proceedings. A general that was a believer heard about it, told him that he had to stop it, so he had to stop the proceedings. They made 300 boats, not in 15 days, in 12 days. There were 4 other companies that had all agreed to make 100 boats. So between their 300 and the other 4 companies, 100 apiece, there's 700 boats. After 12 days, the government came to them and said, the other 4 companies that were supposed to make 100 apiece are all behind. And the owner of the company said that he wanted to say, "You mean the ones that were working 7 days a week?" And the government said, "Could you make some more?" So they made another 100 boats in 3 days. They made 400 boats in 15 days. They send all 700 boats overseas, the 400 from Correct Craft and the 300 from the other lagging companies. And when they got to the Rhine River, the 300 boats from the other manufacturers didn't work because they couldn't handle the engines that they were building to put in the boats. To which then they thought, we don't have enough boats to put our troops in. Miraculously, all of the troops fit into the 400 boats built by Correct Craft. Eisenhower said it was a miracle. All because they committed to honoring God. Chick-fil-A, dominating the fast food industry. The company generates more revenue per restaurant than any other fast food restaurant chain in the United States. Chick-fil-A's average sales, this is from 2015, Chick-fil-A's average sales per restaurant were $3.9 million. Its competitor, if you could even call it that, KFC, is at $1 million per restaurant. The sub-chain, Jason's Deli, was the distant second with 2.7 per restaurant, 2.7 million, followed by Whataburger and McDonald's, each with 2.5 per restaurant, staying open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what's the secret to Chick-fil-A's success? According to Business Insider Online, a study revealed that Chick-fil-A, this is why they're so successful, they have the best drive-through system. Thank you, Business Insider. Now, they may have the best drive-through service, but I think we all know it's not the drive-through service. Because God blesses this principle. You stay underneath the covenant, then you get to enjoy the blessing that comes with staying underneath the covenant. Companies like Correct Craft, Chick-fil-A, Hobby Lobby continue to grow and outpace their competitors, and they continue to do more in 6 days with God than their competitors can do without Him. You've got to completely trust God. If you have difficulty resting, you have difficulty trusting. You have to completely trust when you go to sleep. You got to trust God when you go to sleep because you're not creating anything, you're not inventing anything, you're not mastering anything, and you're the most vulnerable you ever will be when you're sleeping. Anybody ever had a rough night trying to get to sleep? Anybody ever have that? I've had problems with that, I admit, times. I can tell you why. I didn't trust God. Can't go to sleep, Devin. Man, too much to do. I got to take care of the things. If I don't do it, not going to get done. Too much on my mind. Worried about what's going to happen. I'm married to an amazing woman who can pretty much sleep anywhere, anytime, any place, and fairly quickly. And she sleeps pretty hard. One night we were in bed. She was lying there sleeping. I was lying in bed doing what I was supposed to be doing, figuring out the problems of the world. The world needs me. And I thought to myself, must be nice. I mean, doesn't she know that she's supposed to be awake with me figuring out the problems of the world? She can just sleep through about anything. And here's what I thought. In my arrogance, here's what I thought. You know why she's sleeping? Because of me. Because I take care of her. The reason that she can sleep so soundly is because she has me. She doesn't have a worry in the world. She has a wonderful husband that just takes care of her and tends to her and loves her as Christ loves the church. And then the Lord said a couple things to me. The first thing He said to me was this: do you really think that it's because of you that she's sleeping so soundly? Do you really think that it's because of you, because she can trust in your ability, in your ability to take care of her? That's why she's sleeping so soundly. And then he asked me this question. Hey, why aren't you sleeping? To which I replied, well, because I don't have a husband. That's the way we talk. And I can only imagine the pain that went through God's heart, because he said, oh, really? Let me tell you something, son. I can take care of you way better than you could ever take care of her. And if you trusted me, you'd go to sleep. And it's when you live with an attitude of rest that you bring some breathing room into your life, because everything isn't dependent upon you. And you recognize that the world can function without you, actually. Everything isn't riding on you. That's why John can say this in John chapter 3, verse 30. He says this, Jesus must become greater, while I recognize that I'm not as important. In other words, he must move to the center while I step to the side. And it's then that I can trust. Henry Nouwen, in his book, The Living Reminder, he says this, unmask the illusion of busyness, usefulness, and indispensability. Some of us think we're indispensable. It indeed is a hard discipline to be useless in God's presence and to let him speak in the silence of my heart. But whenever I become a little useless, I know that God is calling me to a new life beyond the boundaries of my usefulness. What if every day I emptied myself of me and I filled myself with him? What if I didn't think that it depended upon me? As we fill our lives with so much stuff, meaningless stuff. Well, I got to get a bigger house because that'll make my marriage better. Got to get a nicer car because that'll make me feel better about myself, and I got to maintain that now and maintain this lifestyle that we've created, and I got to get the promotion, and I got to go to the meeting because that's where I get my significance, and that's where I get my affirmation from, and I have to have my kids in all of the best opportunities because God forbid we spiritually invest in our kids, and I have to have the perfect body because my soul isn't as important as my body. And we copy the behaviors and the patterns of a world that pulls us out of alignment with him. Can I just tell you, at the end of the day, it's idolatry. It's a big word, I know. It just simply means that there's something ahead of God. And David wrote in Psalm 46, hey, be still. Be still. And it's in being still that you know who is God and who isn't God. In fact, if you're not still, you don't know that he's God. When was the last time you were still enough to remind yourself that he's in control? It's in being still. If you have a hard time being still, you have a hard time trusting that God can get more done with you resting in him than you can without him. Jesus, coming into Jerusalem, makes a statement that I think is so poignant for the world that we live in today. Luke chapter 19, he says this, drew near, he saw the city, and he begins to weep over it as he's coming into Jerusalem, saying this, I would that you, even you, would know the things that make for peace in your life. Listen to that. Don't you know that he weeps when he looks at our strivings and our wrestlings and our wranglings and our busyness and our turmoil and the pursuit of more? Jesus comes out over the hilltop of our lives and he says, I would that you would know what peace is and where it comes from. But you've got to be still in order to know that I'm God. And the way you do that is by creating some breathing room. I want us to live with an attitude of rest. Let me say it this way. I want us to live with an attitude of trust. How many want to trust him in a new way this year? Come on, let's just bow our heads. His Holy Spirit is here.